Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue straight on till morning. Meanwhile, on the high seas, the sun shone its absolute hardest. The sky it sailed was a pure balmy blue, empty for the occasional harmless puffy cloud and the impressive, if subtextually unimportant albatross. This was Neverland. It was a giant white bird, distinguished from the small white birds, seagulls only by size and call. The sea below stretched far and smooth in every direction, green as a precious gem. In London, someone would point out how one could see the Earth's curvature at sea after only about 12 miles, but this was Neverland, and nobody cared. The horizon did curve gently, and little wispy clouds would flock to its sunrise and sunset for a perfect viewing. That was what geometry and distances were in for Neverland. A jolly pirate ship flew over the waves. Its sail puffed out like a giant wind child was blowing over them. Its skull and crossbones flag snapped merrily in the wind. The whole scene practically screamed adventure and shenanigans, as in Neverland it would. But something was wrong. The crew on the deck was neither swabbing reluctantly or singing lustily. There were no sea shanties being belted out, or harmonicas or pipes being played. No one was avasting or something-ing the mainsail, or trying to figure out how to spell fossilical. They sat or stood uncomfortably, resting their mops, unable to play mumbling pegs, mindlessly hauling rope end over end beyond its seemingly use. All eyes were directed in front of the ship, where the readers should be too. The prow of the Jolly Roger, a ship well known to fans of Neverland, awake or asleep, was decorated with a giant skull as is on its flag. But its famous figurehead was eclipsed now by a newer, more intricate, and far more terrifying decoration. A giant cage of golden wire and evil pointy bits that was suspended precariously over water. Captive inside was squirming splotch of blackness that didn't quite resolve into focus. It deformed and swelled and shrank and stretched, but somehow never managed to ooze out one of his sharp pincers that held it in place. Four of them, sharper than Sleeping Beauty's spindle, were set around the thing at the points of the compass. Each dug deeply into the material of Peter Pan's shadow. Four more were set in points indicating places only known to Captain Hook, Mr. Smee, and perhaps the shadow itself. Its skin ripped around the barbs like a horse's flesh when a fly lands on a sore. The shadow hunkered down, trying to figure it to be as small as it would underfoot at noon on the equator, to virtually disappear, and thereby free itself of its points. But somehow it remained stuck. Long, thin, sickly strands of shadow ran from the bar back to its center, refusing to snap free. The shade would vibrate for a few moments like a hideous spider prevaricating in the middle of its web, like reforming itself and trying something new. But for long periods of time, it would give up, it would resolve itself into a version of Peter Pan, albeit a horribly distorted one. In terrible irony, it put its arms out as if it were Peter, flying free, banking and turning out in the wind. Pulleys and wires under the cage attached the pincers would then twist and squeak and groan, almost in ridicule of the normal creep of a ship's ropes and rigging. These wires ran through guides and eventually connected to the captain's wheel. When the shadow banked, so did the ship. That the shadow was uncomfortable amounts of pain wasn't even a question. Sometimes its shrieks actually bordered on the audible. No pirate slept through the night comfortably, even with bellies full of purloined grog and bits of cloth stuffed into the ears and kerchiefs wrapped around weary heads. Even when the cries couldn't be heard, its torment could be felt humming throughout the ship. The crew, already an unhealthy lot, looked even sicker than usual. "Smooth sailing today," the Duke observed reluctantly, afraid, unlike all of them, to break the streak. Ain't right," Jareth mumbled. Go talk to him. Talk to him again, screaming Brian told Zane. The tall, skinny pirate spat in response to this, but without conviction. Oh, go on then, Ziggy pushed. You drew the short straw. You have to. Kill as unlikely as a reason as within me, Zane sighed. But better to be dead than caught in this misery forever. He sauntered over the captain's quarters and knocked. An irritated voice got from within. Mr. Smee, could you get that? Smee, where the deuce did you go to? Dash it all, I have to do everything myself. Come in, the captain finally roared. Zane swallowed and took one last look back at the crew. They all gave him unconvincing grins and thumbs up. He sighed and opened the door. He would rather have done many things, including face a street of sharks with just a bowie knife rather than enter the dark, unwholesome hold of his captain. Hook looked as resplendent as ever in the ridiculous red frock coat that Zane sorely coveted. But his face was an unhealthy pink, glowing and perspiring from something unnatural. Certainly nothing wholesome and clean like working the mast, counting loot, or cutting a throat. Begging your pardon, Captain, Zane began, trying to remain polite, something he wasn't much used to. Ah, Aladon, you would appreciate this out of the whole crew. I've come up with some tweaks to the Painocon that only enhance its effectiveness, but also add some varied style flourishes. Zane licked his dry lips and leaned over the table where Hook gestured. Apparently, the captain had been scribbling away beautiful swan feathers on a sheet of parchment. His fury and passion betrayed by the untidy spots of ink all over his sketch. None of it made any sort of sense, except for the flourishes Hook had described, which were drawn as neatly and intricately as an architect's design. Lovely, Captain. Zane let his eyes roam over the rest of the desk, which was covered with black leather-bound books, scroll written in what appeared to be Greek, and one particularly hideous tome labeled the Necromonicon. I knew you'd like it. Hook grinned smugly and chomped down on the upper cigar of the twin Seraglio holder he sported. Yes, Captain, amazing. Captain, so the boys were kind of wondering when this would all be over. It's a lovely spring day, sir. We've got a cracking breeze. Perfect weather for despoiling a port or two. Yes, I know. I feel it too, Zane, Hook said with a sigh, looking nostalgic. The sort of air reminds me of when I was a young man, skewering a few of the Queen's finest. But, work first, play later. The pirate was on one hand relieved by the sand from the intemperate Hook. He had expected to be fired upon, or stabbed, or worse, to sit through one of the screaming, incoherent lectures the captain of the Jolly Roger so enjoyed. On the other hand, the seemingly random tempers of Hook was actually quite predictable. This behavior was not, and therefore, terrifying. Knowing he was dangerously tweaking crazy, Zane nevertheless persisted. He had drawn the short straw after all, and the pirates did their best to cut their throat. What work would that be, Captain? Why, finding Peter Pan, of course, Hook said, laughing at his crew's idiocy. Once we have him, I can put my final plans into action. He must be there to watch the destruction of Neverland, of course. If we're on time, I could just leave him to this point and everyone else's fate. But that would be missing the point, wouldn't it? It would be revenge, lacking finesse. Anyway, one way or another, after we'll be free to do whatever we want. Maybe we'll upset the power structure in a small Caribbean island nation. That would be a nice change, eh? A little civil war, a revolution for the masses, roast some pigs, party like it's 1699. That sounds lovely, Captain. It's just that the crew, this work of capturing Peter Pan seems to be dragging out a bit. He continued quickly, seeing the look on Hook's face. And this whole movement ye have here with shadows and black magic, it ain't right, sir. It ain't right or wholesome. That's the way of witches and sea sorcerers. We none of us signed up for a sea sorcerer as a captain, sir. He swallowed but held steady. How's the truth? Plain and simple. Oh, well, I suppose I see your issue with that. Hook relented, tapping his chin thoughtfully with his hook. But shadows, what can you do? There's no other way to deal with them other than black magic. They are literally black. But you're right about things dragging out a little long. Time's a-ticking, Zane. You can literally hear it. That foul beast of a crocodile is nearly upon me. We don't have forever, you know. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can move on with our lives. I have to get rid of Peter Pan and his silly Neverland friends before we can all be free. Zane sighed. The captain of the Jolly Roger was somehow both more reasonable and more insane than ever. There was nothing that could be done besides mutiny, and who was going to try mutiny against a psychotic Hook captain who knew black magic and had captured the power of a shadow? What if, the pirate begged, what if we went after some other annoying lad, one of the other lost boys maybe? Or someone else entirely, someone close and easy to grab? Then you can do whatever you want to Neverland and we'll be on our way. Hook laughed. Well, what would be the point of that? This is revenge, Aladon. Peter Pan must see what happened to everything he loves and perhaps die on his own. Of a broken heart. Zane grounded his back teeth in frustration. He tried a different course. You know, some would say you're chasing Peter Pan isn't actually about revenge, sir. Oh, what else would it be then? The captain growled, holding up his hook. Despite his lunacy, he kept it regularly sharpened and polished. It glittered even in the low light of the lantern. Well, some would say, not me necessarily, Captain, but some might say it's less about revenge and more about, well, chasing your own you, sir. Hook stared at him. In the dim hole, the two regarded each other silently for a long, awkward moment. What in blazes is that supposed to mean? The captain finally demanded. Well, it's like this, Captain. Peter's young and adventurous and can fly, sir, and you could never catch him. He's always receding from you, as it were, sir, like youth. And also, he cut off her hand, which could be looked at as a representation of the end of your powers with a sword, and, oh, shut your bloody nonsense up! Hook roared, standing up and throwing the desk over. As the book tumbled and he pulled out his flintlock, Zane felt a strange sense of relief. This was the sort of ending he expected. I ought to shoot you in the head, you insane Freudian dimwit, Hook growled. We're only Yuggians on this boat, you know? I can see all this focus on Peter Pan has made you a bit loony. Me? Loony? Focus on Peter Pan? But Hook wasn't even paying attention. Well, maybe we could all use a break, he said with an air of giving up. A bit of R&R might do you good, and the crew some good. And as it happens, although Peter's shadow is leading us almost directly south, I've been given an errand to get done first at Skull Island. Zane's face lit up. Skull Island? The boys will love that. We could just dig up some casts there, have a right party, and then we'll get back to you feeling yourself, sir. Yes, well, I suppose you and the crew can have an evening. I need to work to prepare for my final showdown with Peter. Hook's eyes flicked to a pile in the corner. It was almost indistinguishable from the other pirate bric-a-brac he chose to collect. Pinafores, urns, snuff boxes, an evil-looking and sinuous black dagger. But there were slightly capped quarter caps with what looked like 3 X's stamped on their sides, and a pile of rope or fuse. This is also what looked like a broken clock. Hook saw surprise on Zane's face. Oh yes, I know, usually I hate the dried of things, but it's just one less clock, the captain mused quietly. The last clock for Skull Island. Alright, Captain, whatever. I'll get to the crew about landing on the island. They'll be happy to hear it. But Hook was already picking up the desk and frowning at his drawings. If you see Mr. Smee, send him in here. That rascal's been missing all morning and I haven't had my tea yet. Zane sighed, shook his head, and prepared to deliver the tiny bit of good news to the crew. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.